So another rule is I never watch the news. You advocate that, and occasionally I like breaking that rule just to remember what a great rule it is. But when I watch the news show and if commercials come on, it's all about psychotropic drugs. They have a drug for every emotion. If you're scared, tired, sad, you're too happy, whatever, we have a drug. It's going to fix it. And a lot of these so-called antidepressant drugs have a side effect, or I call it a direct effect, where people get suicidal. Is that because they're in life experiencing contrast, and all of a sudden they're taking a drug to try to disconnect them from source, and they just rather not be here? Or can you elaborate on how these drugs are affecting society?
Well, there are a number of things that we want to say about the whole conversation about that. But first we will say, in direct response to your question, that since everything that you're feeling and everything that's unfolding for you is simply about your relationship to the vortex, then anything that you do, it's sort of like we were saying earlier about Esther delegating action or taking action instead of finding alignment. In other words, finding alignment through action doesn't really find alignment. It just prolongs the discord. Because when you take action to try to soothe something and you don't deal with it vibrationally, all you do is get an artificial sense of distraction or relief, but you haven't really done anything about changing the vibration. And so taking the medication sort of falls in that category, where you do something other than the vortex work in order to temporarily soothe the situation, but the vibrational situation is not soothed, so it's going to eventually show up in another way. And so what happens, it shows up in another way and stronger action is required, and then it shows up in another way and stronger action is required, until eventually people get themselves so vibrationally out of whack. We've been saying for a long time that we are really not advocates of taking anything or doing anything that allows you to put off the alignment work, which is important. Because you keep expanding, and keeping up with your expansion is everything. As Jerry and Esther, for a very long time, have stood in a position, not in a position of fearing illness, but more in a position of being determined never to have it. Determined never to have it. It's sort of like, I've decided. You said something a little bit ago about I have these rules. And so they had these rules. We've talked about Esther with the clicker in her hand and how fast she's gotten on the mute button. And so when something comes that is not pleasing to them, like bombs dropping on countries or police brutality or medical things, Esther was so quick on that. And it was as if she was saying, Jerry too, as if they were saying, not in my world, not in my world, not in my world. But there's a tension in that. In other words, that's not doing the vortex work. Holding yourself against what you do not want is not the vortex work that we're talking about. You see what we're getting at? Mm-hmm. So the work that we are talking about, we want you to be in this place where, and Jerry and Esther too, and all of you, where you can see the commercial, or you can see someone advocating something, and you can say to yourself, maybe I don't choose that, but there may be people who are in the place where that's the best that they can do right now, and everybody's out there trying to make a living, and I do not have to make this my axe to grind or my cause to push against. This is not something that I have to make an issue at. I'm not going to tie myself in a knot over this. Instead, and then go general. Go general. Now, how could you go general with something like that? Well, people are all in a different place. People are ready for different things. There's not one thing that's right for the whole world. There are many things that are beneficial to people. Sometimes the right thing comes at the right time. That might very well be the path of least resistance for someone. Just because it's not right for me doesn't mean that it's not right for someone. Things wouldn't be created or developed if there wasn't someone calling for them. The world is a very big plethora of things to choose from, and I was never assigned the keeper of the platform platform or the one who gets to choose what's there for everyone. I don't have to control all those moving parts. It's not my job to figure it out. My work is my vortex work. I don't have to stand as the keeper of or the guarder for the world. That's something that Jerry's become very aware of just recently, is that he was standing in a place of wanting to protect the world from itself in many ways. In other words, trying to hold the vision or hold the thought, but just the same. He said for years that when you put pressure against something, when you push against something, you put equal amount of pressure on yourself. And that's something that this synthesizing of all of this is doing. And you're speaking to it in a very powerful way, you see. So you'll know when you've sort of cooled your jets or come into alignment, when you're having a casual conversation with someone and you're no longer saying, I'm exhilarated and terrified. Because you'll realize that you've taken the pressure off yourself by realizing you don't have to figure it out all at once. You don't have to get it right the first crack out of the box every single time. That you have this wonderful leeway, that you have these resources of source at your back, that life is just causing you to continually put more into the vortex, that you're constantly going to be taking the bounce, that the bigger the contrast, the greater the bounce, and when you come into alignment, the greater the exhilaration. And then just announce to yourself and to anybody else who is listening is, I like playing in this high stakes game. I love feeling the fullness of life fulling through me. I've never been complacent, or for as long as I can remember. I've always been someone who is really going after it. I like playing fully. I like being the best at what I am, but I am adding to this recipe of this passion that I feel so much. I'm giving myself the advantage of soothing mental, emotional breaks. In other words, we don't want you to work fewer hours. We want you to come to the place where you don't think it's a big deal to work as many hours as you're working. In other words, we want you to say, life is calling through me in a very powerful way, and as long as I feel really good, I know I'm right on track. You see what we're getting at?
That's my question. Thank you.